from the worlds of the Genesis of Androzani Advent Calendar. The December Dump.
Alright. Callum,
Yes.
why does Jaime Lannister wish he was poor? Because he needs hand-me-downs. Hello and welcome to our next Game of Thrones reaction and review. We are doing Season 3, Episode 6, which is called The Climb. If you want to see our full-length reaction, go to patreon.com/Genesis of Androzani. We also have early access to this video, and we have requesting videos for us to do. If you go to twitter.com/Giandrozani, you can get in contact with us and all sorts of things. And I also have a Letterboxd account as well, which I'll put in the description. It's been about 6 days since we watched Kiss by Fire, but
Yeah.
we thought it was a phenomenal episode.
I thought it would be good.
Yeah. So going off that, what are your anticipations for The Climb?
I think this one's just as good. I want the second half of the season to really pick up momentum. Because I think while the first half was solid, I felt it was lacking in some areas. So I'm hoping, second half, that it just continues to rise, at least in a overall quality.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I think season 3 so far has been good. Last episode was definitely the best so far. I'm hoping we just start to see a rise. Getting the final episode of the season.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we're now in the second half.
Yes.
If we remember, it was season 1, we had a golden crown at this point, and that changed everything.
It did, to be fair.
And in season 2, we had the old gods and the new, and that one did a lot for a couple of the storylines, particularly Theon Greyjoy. So this one might be a bit different to that, because rather than adapting a full book, they're now adapting the first half of a book into a season. So the story beat may not be quite the same, but yeah, you just gotta think to yourself, well, you know, coming off Kiss by Fire, they've got a lot to play with, so you need to wait and see what happens, what they do with it. But having said that, even when there are episodes that don't massively progress the story, I still feel like they are enjoyable.
Oh yeah, every episode has been thoroughly entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot of really good scenes in every episode, and they're all pretty well. So like, I don't have like massive complaints, but I definitely think there are parts that just have a bit of lacking in comparison to everything else, which is such a. That's the thing when you get episodes like the majority of season 1, where like most episodes were some of the best well-written television you probably see.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It makes everything else look.
Yeah, I'd
like
say that
it is worse. By definition, it is worse, but it's still great stuff.
the only episode from this season so far that I feel matches season 1 is Kiss by Fire. That's it.
Yeah, I agree.
The others are good, but not as great.
They would probably be like, if just not in terms of the context of the episodes, but just in terms of how good they were, they would be some of like the most raved about episodes in other TV.
Yeah, they
It just
would.
shows like how good the other stuff is. In the show is higher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like the lowest rating we've given an episode was been like what, 8?
Yeah, we were tempted to give
or was it 7.5?
No, we were tempted to give a 7.5 for Walk of Punishment,
Yes,
but we didn't because of there was something in it that was really, really good that lifted it up. because we weren't big on the hot pie scene or the Stannis Baratheon scene. But then there was one particular storyline that was really good in that one.
I think it was Catelyn.
Yeah, that's right. We are going to be watching The Climb. So, are we ready to begin?
Yeah.
Do you think Roose Bolton will give his bastard a spanking for not treating it well?
Yes.
You have disrespected the king in the north. The lads are back.
Boo.
You've got too much wood in there.
Oh, Jesus. I'm having my breakfast. Oh, Jesus. That's the wildling way.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God, that was brutal.
Oh, you're going to punch the rabbits to death?
I have someone else in mind.
Well, someone else is sitting right here.
You're both very good at skinning rabbits. Some of us.
Oh, he didn't do that thing you do with your tongue.
Can we not talk about that here?
Can we not talk about that here? Well, I'm Jon Snow. I've killed dead men.
And if you fall, don't scream. You don't want that to be the last thing she remembers.
You won't be fighting straw men, little lady.
Oh, the strawman!
So many straw man arguments. Oh.
Friends.
Begging your pardon, my lady.
The Lord of
You'll
Light.
be the judge of...
Forgive my manners. I don't see many ladies these days.
Lucky for the ladies.
I didn't like that woman.
That's because you're a girl.
What does that have to do with anything?
I see a darkness in you. Brown eyes, blue eyes, green eyes. Eyes you'll shut forever. We will meet again.
One day.
Mm-hmm. Fuck that.
I know.
That is a very dangerous thing to do.
They are effectively climbing to the clouds. That would probably take like hours to do.
Mm-hmm. And it's exhausting. It's also slippery as well. Because it's ice.
Yeah. Because, yeah, made of fucking ice.
Don't look down. Oh. That looks like it's horizontal. That's how long it is.
I know. These scenes where we're going to see someone drop.
Just seeing if you can take a hit, lad!
Water. You want some water?
God, he's a completely different character now.
I wish I had some for you.
Like, he speaks, like, completely differently. Ah, God.
Deepwood mud. Terrible guess. Of course, you forgot to ask one question. You forgot to ask if I'm a liar. Every reason. I enjoy it.
No.
Our father requires Lord Edmure to wed one of his daughters, Rosalind.
How old is she?
19.
Could I see her first?
You want to count his teeth?
Oh, God. Ugh. Inbred legs.
Why did I let that old
Impossible.
Why?
My grandson is the pride of High Garden. The most... Your daughter.
Is rich. The most beautiful woman in all 7 kingdoms. And the mother of the king.
Old.
Old?
I'm
something of an expert on the subject. You men may have a stomach for bloodshed and slaughter, but this is another matter entirely.
The only thing that might turn it are details of your grandson's nocturnal activities. Do you deny them?
Oh, not at all. A sword swallower through and through.
Well, a boy with his affliction, shall I draw up the order? Or do you consent to this match?
It's a rare enough thing. A man who lives up to his reputation.
That was great. I love that scene. They're like two of my favorite actors in the show.
Uh-oh.
I like how this episode's like a one really long day.
Yeah.
And this is all happening whilst they're climbing the wall. Oh. Jesus. It's like an avalanche. God, he's holding up 3 people with one hand.
Someone's gonna get beat up soon.
Take my hand!
Harry! Your hands are all sweaty!
It's more brooch, really.
Oh, God.
Oh. I suppose a brooch is a sort of pin, so.
The gayman's not interested.
Oh, God.
I feel like I'm in a dream.
Yes, me too. Definitely.
I like how this scene is constructed as like complete awkwardness.
Yeah.
Like it's completely like purposeful.
The most beautiful bride in the world.
Oh.
Beautiful gown of gold.
God, he's so full of shit.
It's terrible, isn't it? The most terrible place there is.
Well, I don't know about that. You could be in the Dreadfort, or you could be in Slaver's Bay.
It could be beyond the wall.
Yeah.
It's hard to say which of the 4 of us is getting the worst of this arrangement. And it's only afterwards, when it's too late, that we realize we wished we'd heard it under entirely different circumstances.
It's all right, really.
Ugly old thing. Yet it has a certain appeal. The Lysa Arryn of chairs. Shame. I did what I did for the good of the realm. The realm? Do you know what the realm is? Chaos. A gaping pit waiting to swallow us all. Chaos isn't a pit. Chaos is a ladder. Many who try to climb it fail, and never get to try again. The fall breaks them. Some are given a chance to climb, but they refuse. They cling to the realm, or the gods, or love, illusions. Only the ladder is real. The climb is all there is.
Don't fall over. Alright, Callum, your initial thoughts on the climb.
I thought it was good. I think that sort of like last, I think it was about 5 minutes was.
That was the highlight for me.
Very, very different scenes with a lot of emotion behind it.
I feel like this episode for me, person, just to cut in, I thought like the first 90% of it was all solid. It was all like really good stuff. You know, some of the plots moved forward, some of the characters were developed. It was very, it was very good. But for me, it's the final sort of 5 minutes from the Littlefinger scene onwards where it really, like, the last 5 minutes was brilliant, and it really summed up the episode as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, go keep going.
Yeah, that last 5 minutes was a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That was a lot that happened, and
it all linked together with that "chaos is a ladder" speech.
It was the most intense I felt in a while.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that whole conversation between Varys and Littlefinger, I think, for the entire thing was like, as it built up, as it went on, it was getting more and more intense. It was getting more, but it was just really like, almost like uncomfortable in a way. But, and then you had the scene with that one. I think I was sort of thinking about it as Littlefinger was talking, and the words themselves, I was like thinking of Ros, and then it cut to the scene of Joffrey walking away with Ros dead with a bunch of arrows in her, and it was it really it threw me for a loop, that did, because I was not expecting, like, it's so weird. I didn't, like, I think we used to talk about this a few times. I did not expect Ross to get as much as a character when we were first introduced to her.
She's one of my favorite things that they've added to the TV show, because she barely even appears in the books at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I only expected her to be a character like, obviously she was in the first episode with
Tyrion,
and then was with Theon, and I thought that was basically going to be it for her character, but no, she had pretty much appeared in almost every episode since then, and she's definitely like a pretty like minor side character, but actually, like, in terms of other people's characters, actually played quite a bigger role.
She has one of the darkest character arcs.
She does, and it's like it literally goes from, like, she starts off like quite fun and like she has street smarts, and she like knows what she's doing. She knows like how, I guess, men think, but as it went on, it got more and more dark. It got more and more.
Well, it really showed
sick.
The difference between the men in Winterfell and the men in King's Landing.
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, like you said with like the men of Winterfell and the men of King's Landing, I think it just shows off that sort of parallels to just Winterfell and King's Landing in general.
Well,
how very different those places are.
The men in the north are rough, and they're a bunch of they're a pack of wolves. But
they're not.
But the men in King's Landing,
psychopath killers.
Yeah, the men in King's Landing are like snakes. They are murderers, and they will use you to get power.
Yeah, it was.
And I think we've been talking since season 2. We've been talking about how Varys was shifting the power in his way, especially when he got Ros on his side. And then to see Littlefinger completely turn that against him in this episode. This episode for me was when Littlefinger has now taken control again.
I'd say so, yeah.
It's taken
I think he really has been sort of like dwindling since season 1.
Well, yeah, he hasn't had had that much power since after Ned was killed.
Yeah, this is when I think he's sort of turning the tide for him, where he's sort of like showing off his more psychotic side to him, where he is quite a dangerous man. Because I think in season 1, he was I think the impression you would get from him is that he is very clever. He knows what he's doing, and he always has a plan. He knows how to use people for his advantage. But as it's gone on, I think this season has shown off how dementedly evil he is.
Mm-hmm.
Like what he'll go to get what he wants.
Yeah, and and it's generally agreed in the Game of Thrones fandom that the Chaos is a ladder scene is his most iconic scene in the show, because it completely sums up his character. It's a bit like maybe not to the same extent, but it's a bit like the Jaime scene from Kiss by Fire. That scene, when you think of Littlefinger's character, Chaos is a ladder absolutely defines who he is. Mm-hmm. And then I love the way when he says that speech to Varys, it has his voice over the Joffrey Ros scene, and then you've got obviously Sansa sees his ship leaving King's Landing without her, which is something that he promised. He promised to take her to the Eirich, but then of course she sees his ship leaving, which, you know, in her mind it's betrayal. And then you've got like him saying, you know, it's all about the climb, and then of course that relating to them literally climbing the wall as well. Like, just like Kissed by Fire, I feel like this episode
is a ladder.
Yeah, just like Kissed by Fire, I feel like the title of this episode really it shows off the themes. But the difference is with Kissed by Fire, it was littered all throughout the episode, whereas here, it was like a bunch of pieces that accumulated across the episode, and then it all clicked right at the end. I think that scene is the best place to start, just that Varys Littlefinger scene, because I feel like that whole scene just wrapped a lovely bow on the episode for me. Because this episode very much showcased a lot of it showed a lot of the, you know, ladder of the world, and how people are having to get around it, and there was some very, very interesting subtext in this episode. Like, obviously the scenes weren't, you know, super dramatic, but in terms of like subtleties and not only the acting but also the writing, there was a lot of subtext in this episode about people in the world and who they're aligned with. And like now there's a bunch of characters based on actions that they've had in this episode that have very questionable allegiances, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. There is a lot of that, and that fine detail is why I think that this show can get away with filler episodes, unlike some others, because it needs those episodes to breathe and to develop all the fine details. And I genuinely believe that this episode does that, which is why I think it is actually probably better than someone watching at surface level would think. In terms of energy, it's a very mild episode. I think in terms of the writing, it's actually quite important.
The whole thing with Littlefinger, I think, was very well done. I'm glad it feels like he's back in control. It's like uncomfortable to watch, especially with the scene of us seeing Ros brutally murdered. But it's like, in terms of the writing for him, it's pretty damn good.
Mm. And you can definitely feel that Littlefinger is finally ready to execute his plan to marry Lysa Arryn.
Yeah.
Like, it's all come together, because if you remember, it was season 1, episode 7, when he said that I'm not going to fight them, I'm going to fuck them. And like in that scene, he talked about how he was going to marry, you know, he didn't say Lysa Arryn, but he described her. Mm-hmm. I love the way that Varys said, you know, it's very ugly, but it somehow has an appeal, like talking about the Iron Throne.
Yeah.
And then he's like a bit like Lysa Arryn.
Lysa Arryn of chairs.
Yes. I thought that scene was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
I agree. I thought that was a really good scene.
Yeah, and it was interesting because Littlefinger's in the way that Aidan Gillen portrays the character, the way he acts as Littlefinger has actually changed a little bit since season 1, but it was interesting to see a scene. It was interesting to see a scene with him with Varys again, but with this sort of different twist on his performance.
I think the way I would probably interpret it is that we saw more of his like facade in season 1.
Yeah.
And now we're slowly seeing more of who he actually is as a person, and he's like a despicable, like horrible person who is clever enough to know how to get what he wants.
Mm. Yeah, because I feel like in season 1, Littlefinger was still putting on that whole, you know, upper class character for the people, and I feel like at that point in time, everyone still trusted him, and the only person that was really suspicious of him was Varys. because Varys is the only one that really knew about what he was doing, but Varys couldn't tell anyone because obviously Littlefinger had the power and he could very easily have Varys killed for it. But now that Littlefinger's, movings are starting to be a little bit more exposed, you can see that Littlefinger doesn't need to put that character on again. He doesn't need to put on that facade. He can be himself. And I think peeling back the layers and just him starting to sort of embrace being, the absolute snake he is something that I really appreciate about Aidan Gillen's performance, because it doesn't happen suddenly. It transitions. Like from the end of season 1 all the way to season 3, his performance slightly changes and the way he speaks and acts is slightly different. He starts to speak. He starts to speak with a bit of a whisper. You can hear his Irish accent coming out more. It's interesting.
Yeah. I really like it though. It's a nice teaser.
That. I wanted to start with that one because that was obviously the scene that summed up the entire episode, and the cutaways were brilliant.
Yeah, I'd say so.
All right,
very well put together.
Let's rewind back to the beginning. Let's talk through the characters in order. So, we had a scene with Samwell Tarly and Gilly, who set up a campfire and he's singing songs for the baby.
Yeah, that was I think it was an interesting way to open up the episode. I think obviously we need to know what happened after stuff that happened.
I feel like this episode and the way it was paced was very much... it started very, very low down, and then it slowly built and built and built, and each scene that followed the previous got a little bit more intense.
Yeah.
The only exception being, I feel like the only time it really cut in between was when it would cut to them climbing the wall. That would be the only time when we would get hints of the end.
I agree with that.
Yeah, but they started off with Sam and Gilly, very grounded, very peaceful scene,
Yeah, I like how, like you said there with the pacing, how it slowly built up and it got more and more intense as it went on. I like the sort of the first scene of the episode is a nice quiet scene with just two characters talking.
A very simple scene too, and then each scene as it progresses, the story gets more complex, and by the end, it's it's not a mess, but it's very, very intensely complex. It starts off with, a woman and her child, her just trying to get her baby off to sleep. And it ends with a man who's controlling the world like chess pieces. I feel like that's just a really nice way to structure it,
Yeah. But yeah, what I like is that each scene after that, like we said, it's got more and more intense. And then I think they're just the final sort of minute. I feel like it's releasing all that tension, and it's a nice moment between John and Eirich, because obviously Eirich talks about how she wanted to see the whole world from the top of the wall, and that she gets that moment, and then someone who just saved her life.
Yeah,
I really like the way the episode structured that.
Yeah, it's a very clever bit of storytelling to take a bunch of scenes that in isolation are solid, but then you lump them together as a unit, and they make this larger overall story.
Yeah.
This is how you do themes, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really liked it. I don't know. I think it's nice that Samwell, I feel like, really represents the polar opposite of Craster, and he's kind of exactly the thing that Gilly could ever want, because Craster is Craster, and I just feel like because Samwell has this just unconditional kindness, which is rare, especially in Westeros, especially if you've been brought up in Craster's Keep. I feel like Sam for Gilly is very much a breath of fresh air in her life, and also, for Sam, it's it's something that, you know, he hasn't ever done before. You know, he feels responsible for not only this woman but her child as well, which gives him purpose.
Yeah.
And like something small, like, you know, singing a song to a child means a lot. And I think for Sam, he's starting to realize like how nice it is to have someone appreciate him for what he has. Because, you know, obviously his whole life, you know, his father told him he was worth nothing. And just like how Gilly's father treated her like she was worth nothing as well, I feel like there's a natural bond that comes from that. So I do really think that it's not, yeah, I think it really fits the storyline that Sam's sort of like, that his storyline has a bit of simplicity to it. Except the only thing that was a bit more interesting than that was just the mention of the dragon glass and how he found it at the Fist of the First Men, and sort of building up that sort of lore in the sense of he doesn't really know what it is and what it does and why it was there. But it's sort of seeding a bit of information. But yeah, I thought that was a nice scene. Then we had a brief scene with Bran, Jojen, Mira, Osha, Hodor, and Rickon. The first part of that came from sort of just it was Osha and Mira arguing over how to tear open rabbits. That was brutal. But the thing is interesting, talking about like the progression of like the intensity of the plot. It was like it was them like tearing flesh tearing skin from flesh, but it was just on these like little animals, right? But then of course later on when we get to the Ramsay scene, he's tearing the flesh off Theon's finger. Like I don't know, I like the way, again, talking about the way the episode builds its intensity. Like the flesh, the tearing the fur and flesh off the rabbits was like it was yuck, but it was still like quite low intensity, whereas stuff that happened later was more.
Yeah.
But I like the sort of, you know, the bickering between them in the sense that like Bran basically put in perspective that they can't be doing this because, you know, if they fight then they won't survive. And I like how it sort of, again, it shows that how different Osha is being a wildling. How, you know, how they're very savage-like, and how they don't really have manners. The other aspect of this scene that we got was Jojen having a seizure while he was having a vision. And what I like about that is it shows that having these like magical visions has a consequence to it.
Yeah.
Like it just
builds up, sort of like the stakes of it. Wow, like the benefits, and pros and cons.
And it just gives another reason for like his sister to be with him, in the sense that obviously she, you know, puts the belt in his mouth so he doesn't bite his tongue, which is something that we learned. I think it was last episode. Did they put that in Jaime's mouth? I can't remember. Or maybe it was a bit earlier on. There was some episode where someone had a belt in their mouth.
Yeah, I think it was.
Oh no! It was the episode that Talisa was introduced. She put the belt in the guy's mouth and she sawed his leg off.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That was in season 2.
Yeah, that was season 2. Yeah. So we've already learned so far.
On, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was Garden of Bones.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we've learned that obviously they put belts in their mouth so they don't bite their tongue, and she does the same with Jojen when he's having a seizure. And I like that detail, but then also, you know, I like the way that they transition where he talks about Jon Snow being on the wrong side of the wall, and Bran finds out. You know, this is the first news that Bran's heard about Jon since he left Winterfell. In fact, Bran was asleep when Jon left anyway. So the last time Bran even saw Jon was in episode 1 of season 1. And it was nice to see that Bran sort of found something out about Jon, having not heard about him in so long. And then, of course, I like the way that transitions to the scene with Jon. So that was nice, yeah. So what did you think of that scene with Bran?
I thought it was interesting. I like the sort of establishment of the visions having an effect on the host. I think that's will build up to later stakes. later on down the road of the show. But overall, I do like the scene. I thought it was a good scene because I think so far there's like these two like different like kind of people. I think them clashing. I think it's gonna build up to something hopefully. But yeah, I'm enjoying the little bits we're getting from Bran's story throughout these episodes.
Yeah. Yeah, the little tidbits here and there. Then beyond that, we transitioned to Jon Snow, and basically his storyline for this episode was ascending the wall. But before we get to ascending the wall, they had a scene on the ground. I think my favourite part of that scene was the scene he had with Eirich when they were putting the buckles on their shoes, the sort of the things that they kick into the wall. I like the scene where she says, you know, you better not betray me. Because, you know, the Night's Watch don't care if you die, the Free Folk don't care if I die. You know, the only people that care is you and I. So I like the way she's sort of laying it down of you better not betray me, but then of course there's a lot of tension around that with Jon. Because, you know, he is very loyal to the Night's Watch. And she can tell, she knows that he's still a crow. I thought that scene was very good. It was probably one of my favourites of the episode.
Yeah, I agree. I think I do like that.
I thought everything with Jon's storyline in this episode was very good.
I agree.
And then what did Tormund Giantsbane say? I can't actually remember. It was really funny. He's like
make sure don't scream.
Yeah, don't scream.
Want that to be the last thing she remembers.
Yeah, that was great. And then of course, you know, throughout the entire episode they're climbing the wall, and that was a spectacle. I think it was really well done. Like, it's interesting because it's kind of like an action scene, but they're not being attacked by an enemy. They're being attacked by like an avalanche on a wall.
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting. And I also, the detail that Orell was so willing to cut the rope, you know? And then I think one of my favourite moments is obviously at the very end, you know, after Littlefinger talks about chaos as a ladder and talking about the climb, cuts right to them climbing the wall. I like the way that they look over, you know, beyond the wall side, you know, Eirich and Jon can see it from that side. I mean, Jon's seen it before, but Eirich finally sees the place that she's lived all her life from that high view. And then I love the way that Jon picks her up and takes her to the other side to show her his world. I thought that was a great bit of direction.
I agree. I thought that was really good.
Yeah. I thought that last shot was really good, the way it zoomed out as well. But yeah, I don't have much more to say about the Jon storyline. I just really enjoyed it. I thought it was, all the characters got something to do, and it was very tense climbing the wall, and the ending was very satisfying. Then we got a scene with the Brothers Without Banners in Arya's storyline, where the Red Woman, Melisandre, turns up. So obviously we hadn't seen her since Walk of Punishment, because that's when she left Dragonstone to tell Stannis Baratheon that she wants to sacrifice King's blood, and she's going to go find some. And obviously it's because you'd imagine it's because she knows that Gendry is the son of Robert. Mm-hmm. She must have seen it in the flames. Unfortunately, I turned my subtitles on too late. So in the first trade off of Valerian, I actually didn't hear what they were saying. I only got it for the second scene. Did you turn the subtitles on for that scene?
Oh yeah, I had subtitles on.
Yeah. So do you remember what they were saying in the first bit?
Something about him with King Robert, and how he failed to, I guess, convert him. Well, not convert him, but roughly that's what it was about, and how he worships the Lord in his way.
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting meaning. I feel like the scene with, you know, Thoros of Mir Beric and the Red Woman was also really interesting. I just like the sort of meeting of two completely different people on the opposite sides of the world who believe in the same god. Like, I found that so interesting. And I think this probably had my favorite scene with Thoros of Myr in it, when he talked about how, he stopped believing in the Lord of Light when he left Myr and went to Westeros, and he just thought it was, something that they'd tell the children so they would behave. But then, of course, when the Mountain killed Beric, he saw his friend die, and the only words he knew were the ones that he learned from the Lord of Light, and then they brought Beric Dondarrion back from the dead, and then that made him believe in the Lord of Light again. So I sort of like how this Brothers Without Banners faction has been created from this incident. And I like how in this episode we got the real backstory behind how it all began, where the Lord of Light brought Beric back from the dead. And I like how they became independent because they knew what they wanted to believe in. And I like how that then connects with Melisandre's storyline as well. And how obviously she follows the Lord of Light as well. And then we got a very brief scene in that with the Red Woman and Arya as well, where she foreshadowed events for Arya.
Yeah.
Brown eyes, blue eyes, green eyes. Eyes you will shut forever.
I wonder who they are.
I wonder who. But yeah, Gendry has been traded and is being taken by Melisandre back to Dragonstone. So your thoughts on that?
Well, after all of the shit he's been through, after been trying to be captured by the guards of King's Landing, to be able to then be captured at Harrenhal, to then escape, and now finally finding something that he might be able to settle down. Ever since leaving King's Landing, he's then taken by the Red Woman, and he has no idea what's going to happen to him. I think as a setup, I'm intrigued by what's going to happen. I just hope that it continues his story well enough.
Yeah, it's interesting, because he's finally found purpose, and now it's been taken away from him.
Yeah.
What's interesting about this, though, is that in the novels, it's not Gendry that's taken. It's actually a bastard called Eirich Storm, who is also... I can't remember if he is one of Robert's bastards or if he's one of Stannis' bastards. I can't actually remember who it is. But Eirich Storm is the one that's taken because he has King's blood. And you'd imagine if he has King's blood, he's possibly another one of Robert's bastards. But the funny thing is that what they've done is they've basically combined Gendry and Eirich into one character. Well, to be fair, there's only one Eirich in the show and he's in a jar. Like Selyse showed Stannis that there was a baby called Eirich in a jar. But in terms of the characters, they've put Gendry into the storyline that Eirich was in. And the funny thing is that it kind of works because Gendry is, in terms of where he fits in with the story, he's pretty much identical to Eirich in terms of his place, and that he's one of Robert's bastards. And I think it makes sense why they might have done this, because it would sometimes, you want to, if you're using a TV show, sometimes you want to use characters that you've already developed, and to introduce another one of Robert's bastards as characters could make things a bit overcrowded. So what they've done is they've decided to have Gendry be in the storyline, because I'm pretty sure I believe at this point in the books his storyline kind of tails off. So what they've done is they've decided to transition Gendry's storyline into what Eirich's storyline was in the books. And what that means is that in the books, Melisandre didn't have to go all the way up here to get the King's Blood. So everything that happens in that scene is pretty much exclusive to the show, which means that the scene with Arya Stark is exclusive to the show and it's not in the books. So It's interesting because I found those scenes with Melisandre meeting the Brothers Without Banners very fascinating, in the sense it's two different sides that worship the Lord of Light meeting. But on that same account, it's interesting how there's things in this scene that the way that they foreshadow things, they seem quite important, yet they're not even in the books, they're only in the show. So yeah. But yeah, Gendry has been taken and will go to Dragonstone to meet his uncle. He doesn't realize it's his uncle, but he will be taken to meet Stannis Baratheon. So, shall we move on from that scene?
Yes.
After that, we had a scene with Theon Greyjoy and Ramsay Snow.
Yeah, that was some rough stuff.
You know what's interesting? When I was watching Iwan Rheon's performance here, the one thing that I couldn't stop thinking was, like, he seems like he'd be like, he would have been a good casting choice if Matt Smith ever met the Master. Because the way he acts is actually quite similar to Matt Smith in some ways, except it's a lot more despicable. Did you notice that?
I see what you mean.
Yeah. Though to be fair, there are quite a lot of young British actors that are like that, though. Like Eddie Redmayne's like that, and Sacha Darwin's like that as well. There are a lot of young British actors that kind of have that same aura about them.
Though this actor knows how to act in high intense scenes with
he's
competent writing.
Oh yeah, I love the actor who plays Ramsay Snow. I think he's brilliant.
Like, no disrespect to people like Sacha Dhawan and what was her name you said?
Eddie Redmayne.
Yeah, I just, after rewatching Spyfall, both parts, it's just, and then I watched something like this, it's night and day for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I thought the performance here in just that one scene was better than anything Sacha Dhawan did in Spyfall.
Well, yeah, it's because Ramsay Snow is a really well-written character.
Yes. Yeah. This is literally how you look at, like, two things that are quite similar, right? One has good writing, one doesn't.
Well, it's the same thing with bloody it's the same thing with Fantastic Beasts as well. Because Eddie Redmayne's a good actor, but Newt Scamander isn't particularly well written compared to this.
He's also not that interesting.
No. Whereas I think Ramsay Snow is a very interesting character. Because
I think just from that one scene, he like I mentioned, his whole demeanor has changed.
Every aspect of one thing that I think that is so interesting about that scene is the fact that Ramsay is on Rob's side. Like, in terms, the Boltons are on Rob's side, and Theon is seen as the enemy in this scenario. So, like, everyone in the north is happy that Theon is being tortured if they know about it.
Yeah.
But then, from our point of view, knowing Theon's story and how we can sympathize with his journey, to us, Ramsay is torturing someone who, you know, just wanted to be appreciated and regrets everything he's done. I think that is such an interesting bit of writing.
Yeah.
I just love the way that Ramsay was playing with him as well. Like how he's getting Theon to guess who he is. And like how Theon has no idea what's happened in the world since he left Robb, because, you know, he guesses that he's Torrhen Karstark, but Torrhen Karstark was killed by Jaime. And then he guesses that, you know, he's the son of Rickard Karstark, who is, you know, aligned to Robb, which is why they hate him. But it's interesting how in the previous episode, Robb beheaded Rickard Karstark. But Theon is not aware of this at all. And then what I like about that is you kind of get the feeling that if Theon had stayed with Robb, he may have been able to talk Robb out of beheading Rickard Karstark, and Robb may still have that army. Like, I do get that impression because Theon was actually a very close friend, and very, even though obviously he'd give him stick and Robb wouldn't like it, Robb would listen to what he said. The torture was very violent. Probably, I think honestly the Dreadfort torture scenes are probably the most uncomfortable we've had in the show.
I would say so.
Yeah, and Ramsay is very much living up to the reputation that the Dreadfort and the Bolton banner says about the flayed man, how he's literally tearing his skin, you know. And what I love about this is that Ramsay is a bastard, like Jon is, but it's interesting how similar he has some similarities to Jon, but he also has some similarities to Joffrey as well, which is interesting considering that he's a bastard.
Yeah.
Because it's him growing up in a family that treats flayed men as normal. It makes him enjoy it because it becomes a hobby for him. And like in the sense of like Joffrey has been surrounded with riches and gold and high power, Ramsay has been surrounded by the opportunity to flay men alive. The thing is that the thing that I really think that makes Ramsay more than just, you know, a sort of, you know, quirky villain, he's a lot more than that, is the fact it's very clear that he wants to impress his father. And it's what I like about that is that's very similar to what Theon was trying to do in season 2.
Yeah. It's pretty much... It's quite similar in what they want. It's just their sort of emotional response to that is very different.
Yeah, so, and what I mean by, and when I say all that, essentially what I'm trying to say is that I don't think that Ramsay is crazy just for the sake of it. He actually has a motivation. And him, you know, becoming this sort of psychopath, it feels earned in the story because it makes sense how he got to that point. And it also makes sense why no one is stopping him from doing it, because everyone in the North hates Theon Greyjoy. And the only person that can sympathize with him is the audience. But yeah, I just really like the way that Ramsay, you know, he enjoys torturing Theon and playing with him.
Yeah, it was pretty gruesome to watch.
Yeah,
the whole scene.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say about it though?
I just thought it was really good. I think it was a good introduction for who Ramsay is, like who he really is.
Yeah. Yes. Should we move on to the next scene?
Yes.
Right, the next scene after that we had was at River Run. We were introduced to Lothar Frey and Black Walder Frey. These are sons of Walder Frey. And one thing that I really love about this is that it establishes straight away that the Freys are they're just literally the bottom of the barrel, despite the fact that they think they are so high and mighty. But like, you look at the clothes they wear and just the state they're in, they just look shit.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, but the one thing that they do have is they have power over Robb, because Robb swore a vow to Walder Frey when he crosses that bridge to marry one of his daughters. And one detail that I really liked about that scene was the fact that the Freys want Robb to give control of Harrenhal to Walder Frey, which means that Robb is going to be taking away Harrenhal from Roose Bolton. It's interesting because it seems like the thing with Harrenhal is it seems like every single person who gets Harrenhal has it taken away from them. Because like, if you remember, I think at first it was going to be Janos Slynt who got Harrenhal, but then he was sent to the Night's Watch by Tyrion.
Yeah.
And then Tywin was going to give Harrenhal to Littlefinger. Right, he was going to give Harrenhal to Littlefinger, I think, or maybe it was someone else that was going to give it to him. But then that changed, and I'm pretty sure that changed to someone else, and then Roose Bolton took Harrenhal, and Robb gave that to Roose Bolton. And then now Robb is going to change his mind and give it to Walder Frey. You got to really put that in detail on, because everyone around him was very surprised when he made that decision, because now, when you think about it, Robb is kind of betraying Roose Bolton a bit by taking that castle away from him and giving it to Walder Frey.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing about that is in the very same episode, we get a scene with Roose Bolton where he says, he offers to allow Jaime to go to King's Landing, which is the complete opposite of what Robb wanted. So you almost get the feeling that there is a slight tension in some way, because Robb is now going to give Harrenhal to Walder Frey and out of Roose Bolton's hands, and Roose Bolton is willing to give Jaime to King's Landing for the reward. Like, that's quite interesting, don't you think?
Yeah, I'd say so. I really like how it was already done, to be honest.
Yeah. But of course, another part of the deal was that the Freys, because now Robb is married to Talisa, they've suggested that Edmure Tully marries one of the Frey daughters.
Yeah.
And one thing I really like about it, again, is like, Robb is making Edmure do something that he should have done himself. But then at the very end of the scene, he says, "It was all my fault, and now you're going to pay for my sins." And it's not fair. It's not fair on you.
Yeah, it's not fair on right.
Like, it's very clear that even though Robb has won all the battles he's fought, he is losing the war, like he said, because he's now getting so desperate that he has to marry Edmure to one of the Freys. And I think it's very evident that what is causing Robb to lose the war is himself. He's self-destructive with his stupid decisions. By marrying this woman that he fell in love with, and by beheading Rickard Karstark, by, his mother letting Jaime go. It's very clear to see that the reason why Robb is losing is because he is self-destructive.
Yeah. He makes a lot of bad calls at some points.
Yeah. Now he's going to give up the heir to Riverrun. He's going to give the heir to Riverrun over to the Freys as well, which is another castle that Walder Frey will control, because he's going to have control of not only Riverrun, but Harrenhal as well. And you can just see that Robb is just slowly losing everything. And this is like the one option he has left, is to marry Edmure to one of Walder Frey's daughters, so he has enough men to attack Casterly Rock.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what did you think of that scene overall?
I liked it. I really liked it. Thought it was really nicely done. Thought the acting was pretty good. Yeah. I don't have that much to say. I just thought it was good stuff.
Then, of course, after that, there was the scene at Harrenhal with Roose Bolton, Jaime Lannister, and Brienne of Tarth. Where obviously Jaime's struggling to cut his meat because he only has one hand. But
yeah,
I like the detail that Roose Bolton was going to let Jaime go to King's Landing, but not Brienne, and Jaime insisted. He refused to leave without her, which again, it shows they've bonded,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I like that. I like that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, how do you feel about Roose Bolton, attempting to sort of make a deal that he's going to hand Jaime over to King's Landing, considering that he promised Robb that he'd bring Jaime back to him?
I find it interesting. I'm wondering what that will lead to for Robb.
Yeah, you gotta wonder, like, is Roose Bolton working with Catelyn because Catelyn wanted to hand him over to King's Landing, in trade for the daughters. So is Roose actually working with Catelyn instead of Robb?
I would imagine he's working on his own Felicia, I think. At least that would be my guess.
What do you think the motivation is for Roose Bolton?
I'm not entirely sure. I guess well, like he said, he wants to make sure that he was not responsible for Jamie losing his hand, and possibly because Rob is on, like he even said, he's losing this war. He may be winning the battles, but he's overall losing the war. Maybe he's seeing that. He's looking at his options, and he'd rather go with the side where he knows he'll live, because at this point, it looks like Rob might be lose. I don't know. I have to see going forward what his actual true motivations are.
That is a good point. The fact that he may be thinking about his own family's survival, and he may see that Rob is losing the war, and he may think, it would make sense why he'd be tempted to hand Jamie over, because it may protect his family, considering that he can see Rob as slowly losing. So we got a scene with Tywin Lannister and Olenna Tyrell, and I really, really liked this scene. They're two of my favorite actors in the show, and I thought they both have this dry sense of humor that I really like. And the way that
I like the scene. Yeah.
The way they react to each other was really good. I like how at the very beginning of the scene, Olenna says that, it's Cersei should be honored to be marrying Loras Tyrell, and you can see Tywin just smiling, like smirking at it. And then, him saying, Cersei is the most beautiful woman in the world, and Loras should be honored to marry the Queen Regent. And, Olenna saying, she's getting old. Another thing that scene also does is it exposes Tywin Lannister's homophobia, just the same way that Joffrey had it as well. I like the way that Tywin was essentially threatening, saying, what if word got out about Loras Tyrell, being, sleeping with other men? And then, Olenna Tyrell replying with, well, where I come from in Highgarden, a bunch of buggery with other men isn't exactly a big deal, but brothers and sisters would be a big crime. I loved that. That was brilliant. That was absolutely brilliant.
It was a really good line.
And I just love the way that Tywin is in such denial of it, because obviously it would completely ruin his family legacy if it was true.
Yeah, so he literally, I don't think until he would literally have to see it for himself, I don't think he's ever going to believe it, because he would not even dare to think how that would affect his family's name, which is what he's all about. That's what we know about him as a character so far.
Yeah. And I love the way that they sort of played this little game in that scene, and how, Tyrell, Olenna Tyrell was saying how, is it a bad investment to bank on, the Lannisters, considering that they're in debt, and, they're all of the reasons that she listed. And then, of course, Tywin says, well, if you don't have Loras marry Cersei, then I'll make him part of the King's Guard, and your family will dissolve. And I loved how she took the quill out of his hands and says, it's a rare thing, you're a man that lives up to your reputation, and she snaps it. I thought that was great. That was brilliant. Brilliantly subtle scene to...
Yeah.
And the way that, they were negotiating with each other, it was great. I loved it. Loved that scene.
Yeah.
And then we got a very, very awkward scene with Loras Tyrell and Sansa.
Oh yeah, it was so purposely awkward. I think in sort of the sounds around them when they didn't speak, the sort of birds chirping, and sort of the awkward silence, and the way the direction was. I think it was it was probably one of the best scenes of purposeful awkwardness I've seen. Yeah,
in the sense that Sansa wants to marry him because she's still sort of living. There's a small part of her that's still living that little, fantasy that she had in season 1.
Like she said.
Even though she has grown quite a bit in terms of her intelligence, she still has that small part of her. But now that Marjorie has tempted her with, this great life, and she wants it, but she's still kind of a bit I don't really know what to say to him. And then he's awkward because he's not interested in her at all.
Yeah.
But then it's interesting because from a romantic sense, obviously he's not interested. But then in the very end of the scene, they start to relate on how horrible the world is. And like Loris is starting to see like what she's going through and how it's affecting, that whole situation's also affecting his family as well. I did like how at the very end of the scene they did connect on some level. But it wasn't a romantic connection, it was more like a, I can, empathize. I also like the detail of like no one has chosen to tell Sansa yet that she's going to be marrying Tyrion instead. And then of course we get the scene where Tyrion has to tell her, and we don't, obviously it happens off screen. I love the fact that her breaking into tears at the end of the episode. I love the way how that has like, there's like a double whammy with her, in the sense that she's just been told by Tyrion that she has to marry him instead of Loras Tyrell, and she's going to be staying in King's Landing. And then the one thing that was gonna like, the one other option she had that might have saved her from all this shit was Littlefinger taking her away to the Vale. And then right at the moment when she needs him most, she sees a ship going into the sea away from her. And it's just like all of these things that, had been offered to her to allow her to escape King's Landing have been taken away from her at the same time. And now her world has come crumbling down again. And it's like, just when you thought that Sansa, may have found a way out to happiness again, she's now back in the same hell she's been in all this time. Ever since her father died.
Yeah.
I thought that was great. I thought the writing for Sansa's storyline was very well executed in this. Would you say so far that Sophie Turner has surprised you in this show?
Yeah, she definitely has. She's definitely better than she was during the X-Men series, for sure. She's in this. Because of the writing, I think she's elevated to a very competent actress. When the writing is really good, I can imagine that. Well, obviously we know from watching her in the X-Men films, if you give her just anything less than competent writing, she can't elevate in any way because she's not that talented of an actress in that regard. But when you have good writing for her, then she's very competent. She knows how to do a good amount of acting with pretty good writing.
Yeah. She's also very good at playing a vulnerable character.
Yeah. I would say so. Yeah, she is.
Yeah.
I think they tried to do that in stuff like Dark Phoenix, but it just didn't work because the writing was so like terrible.
Yeah. So moving on from that, we also had that scene with Tyrion and Cersei, and I love the way he's still questioning her about like who sent that Manda Moore down to try and kill me at the Battle of Blackwater. And like, when she, essentially suggests that it was Joffrey, I like the way that Tyrion sort of tries to put some logic around it, in the sense of like he starts to question, would Joffrey be smart enough to organize something like that? Like, did you like that scene where he was questioning her about that and how he was?
Yeah, I really liked that scene.
Going through all the different like possibilities and trying to think logically speaking who it was.
Yeah, I really liked that scene. I do think that this season, in comparison to last season with Tyrion, he is like, I think we mentioned it a lot, but he really has been brought down a peg. He feels so much more out of control than he's ever been so far. And it's interesting.
And now he's being forced,
trying to adapt to it.
He's been forced to marry Sansa, and he doesn't want to do it because he doesn't want to put her through that. I did really like that scene, and there's also the small part when he walks into Sansa's room and he's about to tell her what's going to happen, and then he wants Shay to leave the room, but then she doesn't, and it's very awkward. So now Shay's found out, obviously, that Tyrion has to marry Sansa and not her. And yeah, the only other parts that we have left on that list is stuff we've already talked about with the Chaos as a Ladder scene and all the cutaways. You know, with Joffrey killing Ros, with Baelish leaving on his ships after Sansa found out that she has to marry Tyrion, and then of course, you know, Jon climbing the wall. Overall, I just thought the last sort of 5 minutes of the episode were very good.
I think we said all we kind of can say, but I think the last 5 minutes of this episode are just definitely probably the best one of the best, probably not the best sort of like small section of scenes within the season so far, but it's definitely up there.
I'd say this and the Jaime scene from last episode are the best we've had.
I agree.
Yeah. So, historical and reception. The Climb was met with positive reviews from critics. Rotten Tomatoes critical consensus reads, Tywin Lannister and Olenna Tyrell steal the show with their exquisite negotiation as the Climb builds towards the wildlings' death-defying scaling of the wall. Matt Fowler wrote, this week's Game of Thrones started off slow but then build to a roaring crescendo. David Sims gave an episode high rating for people who are new to the series, and Emily Vanderwerth gave it an even higher rating for people who have read the novels. Obviously, it was written by David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, and I thought they did an absolutely stellar job, considering they are still in the peak of their writing phase. Obviously, they've made some mistakes so far in the show, but for this particular episode, I think they did a brilliant job. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought the writing for this was very well executed in terms of just structuring the whole episode and all the characters around one particular build of intensity, and with the climb itself. I think one thing that I have to say, though, about this episode that was interesting was the direction by Alec Sakharov. Because I think I would say, I'm not necessarily mixed on it, but I would say some of the direction in this episode I feel was better than others. Yeah, it was really good. I think there were some parts that were brilliant, like I would say all the scenes with Jon climbing the wall, those are some of the best directed scenes.
Those were pretty good.
Most of them were really good. The cutaways in terms of the editing and like the way it's shot and the way it all fit together with Chaos as a Ladder and all that was great. However, I will say I feel like there were some scenes that they could have maybe been a little bit more creative with. There were quite a lot of like scenes sitting around tables that felt like they were shot sort of a bit plainly, if you know what I mean. Like the scene with a scene in Riverrun with Robb and, you know, the Tullys and the Freys. Then you got the scene with Roose Bolton and Jaime and Brienne. And the scene with Cersei and Tyrion. There was just a bunch of scenes that felt like maybe they could have been maybe a touch more creative with the direction, but they still kind of worked. I think the one with Olenna and Tywin Lannister was probably one of the best ones that were in terms of direction, the way it was shot at the table. But overall, I thought there were some highlights in direction. The scenes with the Brothers Without Banners and Melisandre were really well shot. But I do feel like maybe overall, in terms of consistency with how brilliant the direction is, I feel like maybe this episode was a step down from the last two, because I feel like Kissed by Fire's direction especially was brilliant all the way through it, whereas this one had its highlights, especially with climbing the wall, and the very, very last scene was brilliantly directed, but I don't think every single scene was fully capitalized on, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I feel like they could have maybe done a little bit better. Oh, actually, no, there was one other scene that I did think the direction was really good for. That was the Ramsay Theon scene. I did like that. So for the most part, it was still very good, but there were a couple of scenes at tables that I feel like weren't as interesting as they could have been. And that's all I will say. There's nothing that was bad, but yeah, I kind of felt that there were a few that could have been a bit better than they were. But overall, it was very solid. And
yeah.
The highlights in terms of the direction were great. Especially that last shot where it was showing each sides of the wall. What I will say is the color grading was excellent, especially in King's Landing. It was very vibrant.
Yeah, I agree.
Overall, the color grading of this episode was top notch. And then, of course, we had the music by Raymond Javadi. What were your thoughts on the music?
I thought there was a lot of really good highlights of music. I think the ending, especially, I think.
Well, with that said, I suppose we should get into our first track, because our first track happens at the end of the episode. Not the very end, but it does happen in the last sort of scene or two. So are you ready for our tracks?
Yeah.
Okay. Our first track of the episode is called Chaos is a Ladder, also known as Littlefinger's theme. I think that perfectly fits that scene.
Yeah, I agree.
I love that track. It's probably one of my favorites in the whole show, honestly.
That one was really good. That was a really good one.
It really very much fits Littlefinger. With, I feel like the quiet sections, it perfectly emphasizes which character he is, like the kind of person he is. And then with him coming out and saying chaos is a ladder, sort of exposing himself to Varys. And then, of course, transitions into the throne is mine, which fits perfectly with Littlefinger's character because that is what he wants. You spend so much time looking at the throne.
Yeah.
I think, honestly, that theme is phenomenal. And
I agree.
the drop into a throne is mine always gives me goosebumps as well. It's just such a brilliant piece of music. Yeah. So, anything you want to add on that?
No, that was just really good. That was just really great.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Brilliant theme for Littlefinger.
Mm-hmm.
The next track of the episode we're going to be listening to is called Wall of Ice, which is the new Night's Watch theme. So how do you feel about that?
I like that. I think I like the intensity a lot during that sort of second half of it.
Yes.
And the build-up was pretty good as well.
Yeah, I think the build-up is it's very similar to the Night's Watch scenes with her before. It feels like it's evolved. The Night's Watch theme has become bigger. I think with the scale of it growing, with obviously the wildlings coming into the fold, with the White Walkers somewhere lurking in the background, it's obviously become a much bigger deal. Yeah, I thought that was very intense, very good. What time is it now for?
Oh, yes, time for trivia.
Yes, trivia.
It's trivia time.
The Dragonstone and the Essos storylines and associated characters do not appear in this episode, bar the Red Woman. Marjorie, Bronn, the Hound, and Talisa also don't appear, although their associated storylines do. Several viewers have expressed concern that Loras talks about having French sleeves on his clothing, when real-life France doesn't exist in the fictional world of Westeros. Checking the subtitles, however, reveals that Loras actually said fringe sleeves, not French sleeves. That would have been quite funny, though. Imagine if they'd fucked that up so bad that they said French in this show. The scene between Thoros and Melisandre, which was invented for the series, is the first time High Valyrian has been identified as such. The Low Valyrian that was plot point in Now's Watch has ended was simply referred to as Valyrian. And also the first time it featured in an extended dialogue. It is also the first time that the Valyrian aphorism Vala Magulis has been given its proper response, Vala de Hydas, on screen. Neither term is translated in the subtitles, however. In the books, Arya Stark actually knows High Valyrian. She is a nobleman's daughter, so she receives a full education from Maester Luwin, and befits a girl in her high station, and this includes lessons on High Valyrian. It is equivalent of a medieval noble learning, receiving Latin lessons. On the other hand, Arya is only a 10-year-old girl who took some lessons in a foreign language, and thus she doesn't know it particularly well, compared to Tyrion Lannister, who as an adult has devoted many more years to study of High Valyrian, and is thus capable of reading books written in High Valyrian. Characters from Bravos that Arya encountered do remark that her High Valyrian needs a lot of work, like Syria Farrell, for example, or Jaqen H'ghar. Also, she only learned the spoken language, not the system of the glyphs used in the written language, thus it isn't clear if Arya would understand two fluent High Valyrian speakers talking at a fast pace. She might understand some of what Melisandre and Thoros are saying, but not catch all of it. When asked about this, linguist David J. Peterson said that I am almost certain she doesn't understand it well enough to follow the conversation at all. Sansa probably knows more High Valyrian than Arya, and I bet she couldn't even follow a conversation. Thus, the scene probably didn't mean to the given impression that Arya really understood anything Thoros and Melisandre were saying. The subtitles of Thoros and Melisandre's conversation revealed the Lord of Light's proper name to be R'hllor. However, they mistakenly spell it as R'hllor on screen. Language creator David J. Peterson explained in a Twitter post that this was simply a typo. Peterson also explained in his blog that R'hllor is a word from the Ashai language, far off in the east of Essos, where religion originated. Logically speaking, High Valyrian would slur the pronunciation of the foreign word, which is a reason why Thoros pronounces it as R'hllor, which might explain to the mistake in the subtitles, though it was spelled correctly in the original translation Peterson handed in. Maisie Williams is right-handed, but plays the character Arya Stark as left-handed, as she is in the books. It's a scene in the first 2 seasons when Arya wielded her sword left-handed. Note that in this episode, Maisie Williams also takes a left-handed position during her archery practice with Angai. That must be quite hard, actually, using the opposite hand.
Yeah, I imagine it would be.
Fun fact, I'm actually ambidextrous.
Oh.
I often write with my left hand and I play sport with my right hand.
Right.
Like I'll throw a ball with my right hand, but I'll write with my left hand. It is unclear whether Tywin knows about the incestuous relationship between Jaime and Cersei, but prefers to shut his eyes to it, or truly believes it is just a malicious lie spread by Stannis in order to establish his right as Robert's legal heir. The books do not make it clear either. Tywin's threat to appoint Loras to the Kingsguard in order to deprive House Tyrell of its heir is somewhat ironic. Years ago, the Mad King did exactly the same thing to Tywin, appointed Jaime to the Kingsguard in order to rob Tywin of his heir, much to Tywin's anger. Actual dead rabbits, not props, were used in the scenes where Osha and Mira are arguing over skinned rabbits they've caught. As the cast members have explained, they actually had to film numerous takes of the scene, which meant that they had to skin a new dead rabbit every time. They ended up spending so much of the day with their hands covered in raw rabbit blood and guts. How do you feel about that, knowing that they were real dead rabbits?
Makes it more realistically disgusting.
Yeah, it's just like how in Season 1 how the dead stag was real. This episode is the first time that Samwell Tarly has stated on screen that he is from the Reach. The seat of House Tarly is at Horn Hill. Sam says in the episode that it's usually warm enough in the Reach that they don't really need to light fires. In the book, Sam states that he never even saw snow before he came to the Wall. One thing I should probably mention is that some people get a bit confused, because obviously Samwell comes from the family of Tarly, and then Catelyn comes from the family of Tully, and they sound quite similar, but they're not the same family at all. Horn Hill is in the Reach, and Riverrun is in the north.
Yeah, that I imagine this can be a bit confusing for some people.
Yeah, I think Calvin got confused about that.
Well, yeah.
This is the first time in the series has established in dialogue that the wall is 700 feet tall. So that's 213 meters high. So that's just over 2 rugby field lengths high. That's a very long way up.
It is.
In the books, the dress that the Bolton's men find for Brienne to wear belonged to an old lady, Shalla Went. Partially, Bolton's men presented the dress to her as it was the only dress remotely large enough to fit her. But they also did it out of the deliberate mockery, as the dress still does not fit very well and Brienne looks absurd in it. Lady Shalla was a fat, bent old woman, so the proportions of the dress are still off. The front fits so loosely that Brienne had to be careful that it doesn't fall down and expose her breasts. For the TV series, however, costume designer Michelle Clapton explained in an episode guide that she decided that it would be more interesting if Brienne's discomfort in the scene was psychological. Due to her rejection of the stereotyped gender roles in society of the Seven Kingdoms, Brienne would actually be more uncomfortable if the dress fit her well, as this would be forcing to conform to established norms of feminine clothing and beauty. As Clapton said, I wanted Brienne to put on a dress and looked rather good in it, but be horrified about having to wear it. It meant to reveal a bit of cleavage in the shoulders, which for Brienne is mortifying. The last thing that she wants is to be portrayed as a woman, and in a way, to look good as a woman makes it worse. So we decided to rather go for a dress that looked good, but it was a sense of horror that made it uncomfortable. Is this like a little bit sexist towards women?
I'm not sure.
I don't know. It's weird because they're trying to do it to have her be an empowered female character by putting down other women. It's very strange. You know? Well, I think Arya has a scene with Tywin in season 2 where Tywin talks about, most girls want to, play with dolls, and, she says most girls are idiots. It almost feels to me like they're trying to make them feel like strong female characters by rejecting feminine qualities, which is possibly I don't know. Is that sexist? I don't know. It's odd. Because the thing is, it makes sense for me why those characters would say those things, but the fact that they've been written into the story and they weren't in the books is interesting. If you get what I'm saying?
It's like, it's different how normally now in most things where women characters are putting down like male characters for the sake of men suck.
Mhm.
In this it's like women are, I don't know, weak. I don't know.
It's so bizarre, isn't it?
Mm.
It's I don't know. I don't know how to feel about it. 'Cause like what they are saying is sexist towards women, but it also kind of makes sense why they would say it. Like the characters, I can understand why Brienne and Arya would say that, judging on their upbringings, the fact that they are tomboys, and the fact that they are more boyish than the other girls. I don't know how to feel about it. It's questionable, but I suppose it makes sense. I don't know.
If it makes sense for the character, then
Yeah, I suppose it's justified, right?
Well established, then yeah.
Yeah, I suppose that does make sense. It's just interesting that they would add that into the story, because it's not in the books. Now, I've got a bit of interesting trivia that contradicts some of the historical and reception that we got earlier.
Right.
I'll be interested to hear your take on it. Critics generally treated The Climb as the weakest episode of Season 3. Elio and Linda... It's not. It's better than Walk of Punishment, I can tell you that, at the very least. Elio and Linda of Westeros.org gave their opinion that no outright mistake was made, but that simply after the massive plot climaxes that occurred in the preceding 4th and 5th episodes, which the storyline physically needed to slow down to introduce more setup for future plot lines, quite simply after 2 episodes in which Daenerys dramatically steals an army of the Unsullied and then Robb Stark executes Rickard, Jaime confesses why he really killed the Mad King, and Jon Snow has sex with Ygritte. The Climb has to slow down, explain the subtle political intrigues going back in King's Landing, with much of its plot focused on the intrigues between the Lannisters and Tyrells about who would marry Sansa Stark. It needs to be remembered that the story of the entire season is an organic whole, and there are no standalone episodes in a book adaptation. Much of the setup introduced in the episode has payoff later, i.e. Bolton freeing Jaime is the first sign that he isn't acting in Robb Stark's best interests. Even Jaime notes that Bolton would only free him if he thinks Robb is losing the war to Tywin at this point. Ultimately, stories are filled with introductions, rising action, and climaxes. Episodes 4 and 5 were filled with climaxes, but once these were finished, episode 6 had to shift back into slow introductions of new plot lines. The thing is, like, they've stated what happened in the episode, but to say that that makes it the weakest of the season, I would disagree. Because I think for what it was trying to do, it executed it very well. Whereas there are other episodes, I would say Walk of Punishment probably is the one that I would point to the most, that have a couple of scenes in them that don't execute their storylines particularly well. Like pointing at the Stannis Baratheon scene, and also the Hot Pie scene, for example. If you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And like, I feel like to say that just because it's slower paced and it focuses on developing the story after the events of the previous ones, to say that makes it weak, I think is wrong. Would you agree with me on that?
Yeah, I don't think it being more of a dialogue heavy episode doesn't automatically make it less impactful for the overall story. It's the context of those scenes.
Yeah, because I think The Climb is a brilliant transition episode. Like, it's great for what it does. I think it's great. So I disagree with that take. The TV ratings bear out these opinions that The Climb was the weakest of Season 3 ratings. In the first half of Season 3 was steadily climbing to the point that Kissed by Fire was the highest rated episode in all 3 seasons of the TV series at about 5.35. Oh shit, these are kind of spoilers for the ratings. I suppose I can say it now because it's kind of relevant to what we're talking about. So, Kissed by Fire got 5.35, right? Overnight.
Yeah.
The Climb got 5.5, so it rose. But then the next episode after this got 4.8.
Oh god.
So it dropped quite a lot after this one.
Interesting. Which is weird because I feel like the ending stinger, I don't feel like you would lose a million people from that. So I'm assuming something happened at the time, because that's really weird.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Sting really because it's killing off a character, even though she's a side character. She's been around in a lot of the important stories, in King's Landing more specifically, for a while now.
I think it's quite possible that this episode focuses very heavily on the subtle details, and people like surface level viewers may get bored of it. That's probably maybe why they switched off.
Well, I always feel like there's a lot of development that happens in terms of where characters go. Like, the Wildings are now beyond the wall. Well, from their perspective, they're beyond the wall. I feel like that's a pretty big moment. So I don't even buy that. And also, Littlefinger has left Sansa.
The thing is, though,
King's Landing.
the thing that people aren't putting in perspective, like, The Climb has better ratings than anything from seasons 1 or 2. So, like, and the rating after it was still higher than that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like it's, I don't know, that's weird, isn't it? So yeah, as I was saying, the viewership was 5.5 and it got 6.8 overall, so I thought it was very strong. Obviously, coming off Kiss by Fire, you'd expect it to get a lot of viewers.
Yeah.
But yeah, I suppose we'll discuss the drop when we get to next episode.
Yeah.
Because I think that's very strange. Because I thought this episode was really good.
I'm confident that something happened during the time that was broadcasted, because that's weird, losing 1 million after just one episode.
Yeah, because if you remember,
has a really good stinger.
If we remember, Blackwater got a lot less viewers because it was a holiday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, give your conclusion and a rating out of 10 for The Climb.
I thought this was really good, and I think the last 5 minutes are intense as hell. I think in terms of dialogue, it's pretty brilliant. Music is great for it as well as like the sort of final shot, which is really great. But overall, I think the episode's actually really solid. I think it has a lot of really good individual scenes. I think, like we mentioned with the pacing, I like the pacing where it slowly builds up as it goes on, with a couple individual scenes here and there that are more setting up for the ending. Yeah, I thought this was really good, so I'm probably going to give this 8.5 out of 10. I think it's a really, really solid episode with a really, really great last 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm. I'm on the same boat. I love this episode in terms of what it does. It's a great transition episode. There's a lot of great acting and great dialogue in it. The chaos as a ladder scene is iconic, and the ending of the episode is just brilliant. I love the way it intensely builds up. And I think the one thing that I have that you don't is hindsight. Because this episode, there's many things in this review that I didn't actually mention. Because this episode has a lot of foreshadowing in it. That we will get to once we get to the recap of Season 3. This episode has a lot of foreshadowing in it. And for me, the way that it's written into the story and how all of this takes place in one world and everything just connects, and the way it subtly puts characters in strange places is interesting, and how all the timing fits together, and how you can slowly start to see certain elements of the story some of the links in the chain are starting to split, but it's done so under the radar that it goes unnoticed if you don't know what's happening. I think it's absolutely brilliant, and I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10.
Yeah.
Excellent episode. I really have no negatives to say about it, other than some of the scenes having a bit of a flat direction. But that's just a nitpick, because I think everything other than that, in terms of the writing, was superb. Just an absolutely tightly written, brilliant filler episode with a great ending that wrapped it up like a bow and encapsulated the whole thing. It was great. So, Next time, we're going to be watching episode 7, which is called The Bear and the Maiden Fair.
Oh my god.
So if you remember, The Bear and the Maiden Fair was actually the song that Locke was singing on the road when they captured Jaime and Brienne.
Right.
They sang it the same episode that Jaime had his hand cut. And it was also the song that played after Jaime had his hand cut in the credits. If you remember. So yeah, the next episode is named after that song that's in universe. The Bear and the Maiden Fair.
There better be a bear in it.
What if there isn't?
I'll be upset. For false advertisement.
I mean, it's naming the episode after the song though.
Well, alright, I will accept people singing it.
Well, apart from wanting to see a bear, what would you like to see next time? What are you anticipating?
I'm not sure. I guess probably. I feel like this episode didn't have Joffrey and Marjorie in it, apart from Joffrey in one shot. So I'm expecting maybe because we're getting close to near the end of the season, I'm imagining sort of their relationship is going to sort of build up to their wedding. So I'm probably expecting a bit of that.
Well, yeah, if we remember, there's got to be 3 weddings in King's Landing. We've got to have the marriage of Joffrey and Marjorie. We've got to have the marriage of Tyrion and Sansa, and we've got to have the marriage of Loras and Cersei.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff happening. Other than that, I think probably some stuff with Rob. I think see where the story with Ramsay and Theon will go, if we're going to get more torture scenes. Other than that, I think everything else is running pretty well this season. I think it is starting to pick up slightly, and I'm looking forward to sort of the latter half of this season.
Jon has smuggled wildlings across the wall as well.
That's going to be interesting, coming back to that.
Yes. And we still haven't had much from... we still haven't really had anything from Daenerys since she took the Unsullied, really. I mean, we had that one scene last episode where Barristan and Jorah had that conversation, and she was introduced to Grey Worm, but she didn't appear in this one. We didn't get anything with Stannis this time. And yeah, basically that was... Yeah. So, yeah, that's probably about it, really. Anything else you want to say before we end?
No, I think that was good stuff.
Alright then, well, we will see you all next time for The Bear and the Maiden Fair.